Hello, thank you guys all so much for having me this afternoon. I hope everyone is having a phenomenal day. I'm excited to have this conversation with you guys. My name is Tricia Sitemere. I am the founder and CEO of a personal development and wellness company based out of Dallas, Texas called Control Alt Delete. I get the extreme pleasure of spending my time supporting mid-career women in breaking down their professional and personal development barriers through individual and group coaching. Control Alt Delete stands for take control of your future, alter your mindset, and delete all doubt. And it's not only the name of my business, it is also my personal mantra that I adopted for myself many, many years ago. And it's the guiding principle that I use when supporting my clients. And it was actually my experience in HR and getting to know my clients and candidates and walking them through their career decisions that I transitioned into this work on a full-time basis. I love being able to support them by providing training, resources, and event experiences to support them in accomplishing their personal and professional goals. So since we're here today talking about recruiting, I feel like I should share my resume. Don't worry, I won't. I won't go line by line, but these pictures are a quick, brief snapshot of some of my many recruiting adventures. I have spent much of the last 10 years managing and driving diversity and inclusion initiatives, as well as supporting a number of new hire programs from internships to management development. And throughout that time, I have been extremely fortunate to have been, to have had the opportunity to be a part of some truly amazing recruiting cultures. And I have seen firsthand the impact that a strong culture can have in attracting the right talent across multiple industries, from tech to sales and financial services. So I know that regardless of the industry, that a lot of the same principles apply. So let's start here. How many of you are involved or responsible in growing your organization? And you guys can just drop me in the chat. And that could be either as part of the interview process or as a hiring manager, or maybe closely working with your talent acquisition teams. It's probably a couple of you guys. All right. Another question for you. How many of you have been through an interview process? That's probably all of us at this point. And you probably remember a couple of different things. So take a moment to think back on your collective interview and recruiting experience. What are some of those things that you remember about that? Was it maybe the excitement about the company or the role, doing some research on the organization, maybe reaching out to someone that works at the company currently or has previously worked there? Or maybe it was meticulously combing over your resume, making sure that you felt confident in communicating your experiences in your upcoming interview. Or what about anxiously waiting for the recruiter to call with either that next step or the job offer that you had been waiting for? So you guys remember some of that stuff, right? I want you to hold on to some of those thoughts. So after you've gone through your recruiting process and you've gotten hired, you likely won't think about interviewing again unless you're back in an interview situation or you happen to work in the day-to-day in recruiting. And I don't know many people who actually enjoy interviewing. So it's like, once you're done, they're happy to move on, right? So keeping this experience in mind is a big part of building your recruiting culture. Now, I'm going to pat myself on the back here for just a second because I was a phenomenal recruiter. I was a phenomenal recruiter. I enjoyed the recruiting role and I was simply good at my job. And I don't say that from a place of arrogance. It was just the feedback that I would often get from my hiring teams, my hiring managers, my coworkers. But when it meant the most to me was when it came from my candidates, the candidates that I was supporting in the process. And I was a phenomenal recruiter because I had a secret weapon, an approach that I kept in mind with every single candidate that I brought through the process. I always remembered the human connection. And that human connection really just meant that I paid attention. I paid attention to the little details, the little things that they would share with me in conversation. And it allowed me to build trust and rapport with anybody that I worked with. And this is really what you're doing when building a recruiting culture. It's what people know about the way that you treat potential candidates as they are embarking on a new journey with you in, interviewing or going through your interview process. And that human connection, as simple as it sounds, is really the cornerstone of a great recruiting culture. So to make sure we are all on the same page, recruiting culture is the environment that is strategically created to support business growth that involves every single employee in your organization. It is the how of attracting candidates and pulling them through the door as new hires. And having a stellar recruiting culture, it doesn't happen by accident and it doesn't happen overnight. So there are several areas that we can go into or dive into to drill this down from A to Z, but I have narrowed it down to 4 main buckets, 4 aspects that you can focus on to build a stellar recruiting culture for your company. So visible commitment and support from the top down, getting in the know and staying in the know, leveraging your people, and providing a phenomenal experience each and every time. You guys can tell that I love using the word phenomenal. So let's go ahead and dive in. We can always tell what is important to somebody by how they spend their time and what they spend their time talking about. And this is no different for your organization, both internally and externally. So from the top of the house down, it's no different. Employees in your organization at every level need to understand that not only is bringing in talent important to the future growth of your organization, but the process, that culture in which that takes place is priority from the top down. And so not just the HR teams or the teams that have open headcount you're hiring for, but every single person. So for example, I used to recruit for a management development program, and it had multiple steps in the process. And the candidates would meet with different directors, senior directors, and then they would conclude the process with a panel interview with our executive management team. Now, if you have ever tried to schedule a meeting with 2 busy people, you know just how challenging that can be. So imagine trying to get this done with an executive management team of 8. It definitely had a lot of moving pieces, a lot of moving people, but we were able to get it done. And the feedback that we got from the candidates, regardless of the hiring decision, was always, wow, simply wow. They were always so blown away that the executive management team would take the time to get to know them, take the time to learn about their experiences, what they could bring to the organization, and really just spend some time sharing about the organization. So you may be thinking, okay, yes, that makes sense for a management development program for the executive management team to be involved at that level. But this same leadership team would show that same level of excitement and engagement all the way down through the summer internship program. So not only did it send a message to our candidates, it was clearly demonstrated to all of the employees that this culture was important and that they wanted to ensure that it was something that was done right. So obviously this looks different based on your specific organization, but the bottom line of it is that the efforts, they need to be seen and heard consistently. The other part to visible commitment and support from the top down is understanding your business cycles and investing in workforce planning. So you can't effectively plan for something that you don't know about. So this means taking a look at the data, pulling out the trends, and seeing what the numbers tell you. Things like, when are you hiring the most? What kinds of roles are you hiring for? Are you hiring for a specific location or a specific region? Do you hire more at certain times of the year? Or is it because of transitions, promotions, or even seasonally, or attrition? So what do those numbers tell you? You can then take that information and you can build a plan around it. So let's say you have a hiring surge every June, right? So putting a plan in place or putting the plan in motion in even March or April is already too late. What happens if you don't have enough recruiters or sourcers to bring enough candidates into the pipeline or your process? Or what if you don't have enough qualified hiring managers who can speak to some of the upcoming changes and shifts that are going to be going on in your organization? Or what if you don't have enough trainers to efficiently train your new hires so that they can get up and going and ramped up to get into the positions in which they've been hired for? Or another example, probably one that we've all had to work around, is budget, right? What if you get into a position where you're like, hey, we need to hire, but the budget doesn't make sense? So having all of this information is going to allow you to be forward thinking. It's going to allow you to make sure that you have a smooth process from start to finish. Your leadership teams can dig into those details, and then from there, build out a comprehensive plan with measurable goals and checkpoints that they can provide to those that are driving the specific recruiting process. So there are different types of workforce planning software or things that you can do, or if you're a smaller company, you can craft some of that on your own. But the planning process, the taking the time and investment to really dive into some of that information is all going to be well worth it. So your next focus area in creating a stellar recruiting culture is getting in the know and staying in the know. And I break this down into 3 different areas, but they all kind of lean on one another, and they are all directly tied to listening intently. So the first part of that is finding out what companies in your industry are already doing. Finding out things that they're doing to overcome challenges in perhaps building their own recruiting cultures, and using that as a benchmark for yourself, especially the companies where you look at them and you're saying, hey, I think these people are on the right track. I would like to bring some of that information into our own culture. So for example, in the early talent community, there is a conference called URX, and it is for university recruiters, university program managers, folks that are on the academic side, other people from the university who support career hiring and transitioning students into internships and to full-time positions. And I always left that conference with so much valuable information. I always felt so energized and ready to get back to my team to put some of this stuff into play and watch our successes happen. So I would leave with things like new connections, folks that were open to brainstorming and talking shop with me. I would also leave with new ideas. It would give me an opportunity to think about different ideas and how we can fold them back into our specific process. But it also allowed for some healthy challenging where we were able to be introspective and look at our process and say, hey, here are some things that we can maybe change or tailor to what we're doing already. So it was excellent benchmarking against a lot of different companies with the same goal in mind. And it was also really great because there was a variety of different industries represented and companies, both big and small. So listening externally and finding out what other people are doing. On the other side of listening externally, it is listening internally. So listening to your people, things like why they were drawn to your organization in the first place, or why they have stayed for so long, or if someone was interested in joining the organization, what they might say to them about their experience. All of that information can be used to tell your brand story. You can use it in how you are marketing and attracting potential candidates. Something quick or easy that you can do from there is highlighting employees, right? So when someone is getting highlighted, usually they're pretty excited about it. They want to let people know, they want to share that they've been highlighted. And that's how you get some of that social capital, because they're talking about it with their friends. It's making its rounds on LinkedIn, and people are seeing your organization. They're seeing great things that you want to share about your organization. This is how you get engagement at every level. And when you think about it, creating a stellar recruiting culture is everyone's responsibility. So not only tapping into the positives, those are all obviously very helpful, but you also want to see if there are any trends in pain points, right? And if there are pain points, trying to work through solutions to overcome that. But more importantly, sharing what those pain points are and at least equipping your hiring managers or your recruiters to confidently address these things should they come up in conversations with candidates. So that confidence is important. And then lastly, remembering your candidates are customers too. They deserve your attention and consideration just like your externally facing customers. So I remember I was having a conversation with an HR business partner about some changes in our hiring plan. And we're having the conversation, and she says something along the lines of, I want to make sure that this is a seamless process for the business. And my response was, absolutely. Of course, I absolutely want to make sure that this process is smooth for the client. So as the conversation continued, it became clear that we were not on the same page. So the examples and the scenarios that she was bringing up were all of the direct impacts to the business. Absolutely. Makes total sense. HR is there to support the business, but I was looking at the potential changes with my candidates in mind, my pipeline in mind, because they were also going to be impacted by these changes. So we talked through things and we were able to pivot a plan and come up with a solution that kept both customers in mind, both the business and the candidate. So in addition to keeping the customer, your candidates in mind, you can also get some really great perspective from them in terms of what you currently are doing and what you currently have in place. They are going to be able to confirm all of the really amazing work and effort that you've already put forth, growing and creating your stellar recruiting culture. So take the time to find out what they have to say. They will have a fresh perspective and a fresh viewpoint, having recently gone through that process. It's so much better for them to share any hiccups or any frustrations with you directly versus having them pop up or blindside you on a Glassdoor or a LinkedIn. So it's very easy to think, hey, I know what makes this company great or why people want to work here, especially if you've been with the organization for a while. And absolutely, that insight is important, but getting that information directly from the type of candidates and the talent that you're trying to attract, that will be valuable information. And then you can strategically build it into your branding. So things like what you include in your job postings and your overall talent attraction strategy. So get in the know and stay in the know. As I mentioned a moment ago, the feedback and the perspective of your employees is important when crafting and sharing your brand stories for your organization. But your employees, they also have to be part of the heavy lifting. So remember, it's everyone's responsibility to build this recruiting culture together. Your employees, they have a network of direct connections that could be a great potential fit for the roles that you're trying to hire. So what am I talking about here? I'm talking about referrals, 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 referrals. If you don't have a well-functioning referral program, you are missing out on the low-hanging fruit. And I do mean well-functioning, because if your employees recommend their friends and family and they don't ever hear back, the chances are that those referrals, they will stop. So how do you leverage your people to tap into their networks and referrals? So one, you set the stage day one, right? And let them know that referrals are not only valuable to your organization, but they're encouraged, right? What better time for someone to be shouting enthusiastically from the mountaintops about a new opportunity than when they just start a new job? So make sure that you have that information ready for them and make it a relatively easy process for them to send their referrals into you. You can even take it a step further and provide some education or support or even talking points so that they know what to look for and are armed and ready with those talking points when they are ready to go. So the next part of leveraging your people is making it worth their while. We've all heard of the WIFM, right? What's in it for me? If you can incentivize your referrals, absolutely do it. That is going to help with the quality of the referrals that's coming in, and it's going to elevate your employees from just kind of taking a stab in the dark and referring seemingly random people to these roles. So if you can incentivize it, then you should. And you can decide, where it makes the most sense for you to place that incentive. It could be at the hiring stage, or it can be at the 30, 60, 90-day integration stage. Since you know the best type of hires and what your integration process looks like, that would be up to you. Of course, digging into the data can really help you with that, but make it worth their while and watch those referrals come in. And then lastly, for leveraging your people, you have got to keep it tight. If the trust in your referral program is broken, it will be very difficult to repair. It's like the mirror that breaks, the mirror that you glue back together and otherwise works fine, but you can still see the cracks in the mirror. This is the same thing. Your referral program is like a big mirror. It's the reflection of your organization, and we want to keep the smudges of unresponsiveness off of your mirror, and we certainly don't want it sitting around collecting dust. So there are several ways that you can create and manage your referral program. If you don't already have something in place, a lot of applicant tracking systems have that type of functionality, and maybe it's just a matter of doing some digging and seeing what's available to you. I've seen it as simple as a form that feeds into an Excel spreadsheet. It's not my favorite, but it can get the job done while you work on having it be a little bit more sophisticated and really do what it is that you need it to do. Or if you already have something set up and you're feeling like it's just kind of meh, that is an opportunity for you to maybe run some internal focus groups with folks that have been hired as referrals so that you can get in the know and stay in the know, and then use that information to make the necessary changes so that you can take your referral program from good to great. Which leads me to my last point in creating a stellar recruiting culture. And this one is a biggie. You have got to provide a phenomenal recruiting experience each and every time. You have got to provide a phenomenal recruiting experience each and every time. So important, I had to say it twice. And this doesn't mean throwing a bunch of budget at it or implementing a lot of new complicated software. It means keeping the human connection in mind every step of the way. I, for one, I love all of the software and programs and technology that are available for HR. It certainly has made my job easier over my course of time in recruiting, especially when you think about like high volume or high turnover positions. But that human connection and remembering that on the other side of that resume and on the other side of that application is a real person is going to allow you to strengthen your overall brand. And when you have a strong brand, it makes attracting talent just a little bit easier. You can take all the things that you're already doing, the time, the resources, the effort, and make them work for you by providing a phenomenal recruiting experience each and every time. And I'm telling you, a little bit really does go a long way. I'm sure you guys have seen the memes or the posts on LinkedIn where a recruiter will ghost a candidate, poof, gone, never to be heard or seen from again. And every single time I see a post like that, I just cringe. I cringe because I know how they feel. I know how they feel. I've been ghosted by a recruiter before, so I know exactly how they feel. And likely some of you have experienced that before. It's not a great feeling. And while that one post may not make or break your hire, over time that becomes your brand reputation, and people remember that. That's the kind of thing that they're sharing in their circles. Someone may be saying, hey, I'm interested in XYZ organization. The first thing they're going to say, oh no, absolutely not. I applied, I never heard back from them. It wasn't a great experience. And you there have potentially lost someone that otherwise could have been a really great addition to your organization. So making sure that you get back in touch with them, another angle to this is transparency in follow-up. Most candidates are very reasonable and they understand that things happen in business. Things happen, things change, timelines shift, all of that. It can be as easy as directing your teams or having your recruiters reach out to a candidate and reiterate the excitement for them going through the interview process and continuing the conversation. And if you have a new timeline, great, include that. But reaching out and just touching base, and boom, your candidate, they feel informed. They feel like you care about their experience and what they're going through in the recruiting process. They feel a lot less anxious, and they're able to make a decision based on all of the facts for themselves. And if it doesn't end up working out, at least you haven't burnt a relationship, you haven't burnt a bridge by disappearing on that particular candidate. On the other side of that, your recruiting teams will feel so much less stress. They'll feel like they're not holding on a fish out of water, nothing slippery here. You can ask any recruiter who has had someone reach out to them when they don't have any information. They're like, oh, please, I hope this candidate doesn't reach out to me because I don't have anything to tell them, right? So that transparency can be a two-way street. Just communicating and letting your candidates know what's going on. And then finally, empowering your recruiters to be relationship managers. I know, it's like they've got to recruit and they have to be relationship managers on top of all of that. It sounds like extra work, and I'll be honest, it does take a little added effort, but it really can help in the long game. And I think that's all we're interested in is, how can we over time grow and build a successful recruiting culture. So just because you don't hire someone today doesn't mean that they or somebody that they know isn't going to be a fit for the future. So this could be as simple as keeping in touch. Something cool happens within your organization, you have a list that you can send that information out and share. It's just a quick update, boom. Or if you have a list of referrals or past candidates that maybe it wasn't the right fit at the time, or you have an upcoming hiring surge, you can send them a notification in advance and say, hey, these are some of the roles that we're getting ready to hire for. I would invite you to apply. And then you're starting with fresh, excited people in your pipeline. And that could mean getting through the hiring process sooner. It could mean getting people into their roles so they're producing sooner. It means extra support for the teams that maybe are missing this extra person. A little bit goes a long way. So just remember, when you do get back in touch with some of these folks that you are keeping in touch with, that you provide that phenomenal recruiting experience each and every time. So I know I've shared a ton of information in a relatively short amount of time, and we could be here for hours and hours and hours, and I actually wouldn't mind that. But if you remember nothing else from listening to me today, remember that recruiting cultures are not created by accident, and they certainly don't happen overnight. It'll take some consistency. It takes some effort, takes some trial and error, just like anything worth having. It'll take some cultivating over time, but it's worth it and it can happen for you. Next is that it's everyone's responsibility. We talked about it being responsibility from the top of the house down, and the success of your recruiting culture is really going to be engaging every single employee, having them tell their brand stories, referring and sharing about all of the great opportunities that your organization has to offer. You've got to wow your candidates every time. You want to turn every person who comes through your recruiting process, regardless of the hiring decision, into a raving fan. Turn those folks into brand ambassadors to help you attract the type of talent that you need to grow your business. And lastly, slow and steady wins the race. It's a process. It's a process. Like I said, it doesn't happen overnight. There'll be some trials and changes and shifts and new ideas and things that you add into the mix, but focus on the changes that you can make within your reach. Build from there. Celebrate those gradual changes and gradual progresses that are being made, and do it as a team. So if you would like to keep me posted on your culture journeys as you're continuing to build and strengthen those, I would love to be kept in the loop and to stay connected. This is where you can find all of my information, and I'll go ahead and open it up for questions.
Hi, Tricia. So
Hi.
I'll go ahead and start off with one that came through earlier,
Sure.
and just see if other people might put some questions in the chat. Okay, give me 1 second. Let me pull up my little email where I was making a list. Okay. So it's kind of a comment and then a question. So I have had an experience where an interviewee was not treated well by staff upon their arrival, which in result affected the interview. Obviously, not everything is controllable, but what would you do to handle that? What's the best practice for that?
If an interviewee came in and they weren't treated well by the interviewer as the recruiter?
Let me go back to the question. Apologies. Well, not treated well by another staff member upon arrival. So whether it's like the reception desk, there wasn't a specification on the person, but it seems more like another staff member, somebody a part of the organization, but not the interviewer.
Yeah. So I think that's a two-part situation, right? Obviously, to the candidate, you would reiterate that's not something that we support here. Apologize, that this was their experience, and try to ensure that the rest of their recruiting process is tip-top and phenomenal. And then if you happen to know who that person is, maybe they're having an off day. Maybe they're having an off day, and addressing it with them directly and saying, hey, that's not what we represent. This isn't how we do business, and just kind of keep an eye on it from there.
Perfect. Okay. One other question that I got earlier. Happy candidates make for happy employees, which in turn results in happy customers. So can you say more about that process, a little more in depth than what you have already related to in your presentation?
About happy candidates?
Yes.
Yeah. So if your candidates are coming through the recruiting process and it's phenomenal, and then they join the organization and they're having a phenomenal experience, you can tap into different ways that your employees can share that information. So it could be a bank that you create on your intranet, if they want to post something on LinkedIn, or a feedback jar, or some type of feedback process. Or one of the things that really works is being able to brag on each other. If you have a coworker or a manager or someone that's new to the organization and they're just killing it, and you want to shout them out, encourage some of that stuff. And like I said, they are more likely to want to share that they're having a great experience. And so that's some of the things that you can do there.
Wonderful. Okay. Besides referrals, do you suggest a way of getting new candidates other than the referral process? What's another way you would suggest?
Getting out there and talking to people. So my experience obviously is in the university space. So if, for example, you're hospitality, connecting with some of these hospitality programs, I believe Florida has a really great hospitality program. So tapping into them, tapping into their alumni networks, seeing where there are different groups, you know, there's a LinkedIn group for everything. There's a Facebook group for everything. Sometimes that means getting creative and doing things that you might not necessarily think of off the top of your head, but really trying to find the communities where these folks are talking about new opportunities or thinking about ways that they can grow professionally and putting your job postings out there. I think now in the virtual setting is a really, really great opportunity for that because things are happening virtually. Before, if you wanted to go to a conference, I'm in Dallas, if I wanted to go to a conference in San Francisco, I'd have to haul myself out to San Francisco. But now a lot of these things are happening virtually. So it's easier to connect with people, get on LinkedIn, make comments, start conversations, and you'll see that, you know, people who are interested, who potentially can be a good fit, will start to engage.
Yeah, and I agree with all of those points. Like me personally, I live in Orlando, Florida, so it's just booming with normally, you know, the tourism. And I did go to Rosen College of Hospitality Management. So I went to UCF, which is one of the well-known programs for hospitality. So one big thing that they do constantly around here, well, not as much since COVID, but networking events in general. So like just in general networking events, you can usually find a handful of them every month without a doubt. And I'm sure a lot of people, just due to COVID and the virtual and everything kind of transitioning to virtual, they're doing more virtual networking, which I haven't done any of those yet, but I've been seeing a lot of like ads and stuff, LinkedIn, social media and whatnot regarding those. So definitely a good way to stay connected and kind of keep up with what's going on in the industry, and whether you're looking for potential hires or not, you're at least aware of what's around and who's kind of in the mix. You know, because the quicker you can network, even if it's not something you need now, you're always building those relationships for the future. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Wonderful. Well, I don't see any other questions, I don't think. Let me check Q&A. Okay, hold on. Q&A, one came through. Could you talk a little bit more about diverse hiring? Since we are inclusive and since we are inclusion and diversity sensitive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the first part of diversity hiring is acknowledging it, saying it out loud. Hey, diversity and inclusion is something that we support. It's something that we encourage. We want to bring in diverse candidates. I think what's interesting that's been happening, especially with all of the conversations over the last year in the diversity and inclusion space, is that a lot of companies are running out and saying, hey, this is what we can do externally. Hey, let's make a statement. This is what we want to say about our diversity and inclusion thoughts. And if you don't have any infrastructure and support internally, you're going to attract these diverse candidates and the types of candidates that you're looking for, and you might not be able to support them. So making sure that internally that you're having those conversations and that you have that support set up so that as you're attracting these diverse candidates, they can be in addition to the work that you're already doing, as well as continuing to attract other diverse candidates.
Absolutely, because yeah, it's definitely important internally to know your team and understand your team. Because, you know, if you're bringing in new people, not only do you want to make sure that they're a right fit for the company in general and for the role, but you want to make sure it also helps balance out the team, you know, of the department and everything, and that everybody can be kind of in understanding on the same level of everything.
Right.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay, I think that is all the questions I have. I can wait another moment or two and see if anything comes through. Okay, hold on 1 second. One more. Okay. Do you have any ideas about hiring during the pandemic, since we're now more online versus live?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that the process has to change a ton. So most of the hiring that I have done has been in person. So flying in candidates and, juggling schedules and monitoring flight delays and things like that. Now we don't have all of that. So I don't think that there's a huge difference. I do feel like there's maybe a bit of Zoom fatigue. So if you have a hiring process that is multiple steps or a lot of different people, trying to pare that down, since a lot of people are already spending so much time on Zoom. But I don't feel like the process has to change. If you see a cat in the background, be understanding. People are at home with their families, and it's not the same as them being able to come into the office. If you are, actually an inclusive organization, a cat running by doesn't have any bearings on my ability to do the job and what I can bring to the organization. So just kind of keeping some of that human connection in mind as you're bringing folks through the process.
Yeah, I've been on quite a few Zooms where somebody's animal comes into play, or a child. That's just what it is. It doesn't take away from who they are. It actually gives them more, as you said, it's like, I'm trying to think of the exact word, but it kind of gives it more personable feel. Like that is the reality.
Yeah, it's like we're all human. This is what we're going through. We're going through a collective experience. And part of this is out of our control. I think one of the questions that's been coming up around hiring is, when are we going back to the office, or what is your organization doing in terms of managing folks that are in person and things like that. So if you have people that are coming through the process, try to anticipate some of those questions, or if you've been interviewing and you're kind of seeing some trends, build that information in as talking points. So like I said, that your teams and your people that are leading these conversations can confidently speak to them. And then if they're seeing, certain questions continue to pop up, making sure that you can communicate that back so people can keep a pulse on it.
Perfect. I just had 3 more questions come through. We do have time. So I feel like people are a little bit later
They're warming
as well.
up.
So I'm actually, they're just getting more comfortable, right? That's how it works. Dallas is asking, visible commitment and support from the top down is important, but sometimes organizations fail to realize the importance of the talent acquisition team. So how do you get that buy-in from those at the top?
Yeah, that is a very good question. A situation that I have been in multiple times. And I made a comment about the data, right? So if you come to someone and you're telling them stories about, hey, this is how we need to make XYZ change. This is based on my experience, what we need to do X, Y, and Z, they might hear you. But if you can pull in information, if you can pull actual data, or if you can show some of the progress and the changes, maybe from a benchmark perspective or an external perspective, you can't fuddle the numbers. It's like, okay, this is something that could make an impact. This is something that we might need to focus on. And then the other piece of that, when I have had to influence, is you got to make it easy for them. So if you can, do some of that brainstorming, and in addition to presenting the data, kind of put together a mini plan, or, hey, this is a place where we can begin this brainstorming, you're much likelier to pull them in and then get them excited. And then once they see, oh, okay, this is what this impact could look like, then you start getting other people involved, and it kind of grows from there. And then that consistency, that building of the muscle, is what's going to be key to getting it to the place that you want it to get to.
Perfect. Thank you.
Welcome.
Next question's from Julie. My team consists of another coworker and myself. This seems geared more towards larger corporations, but is there a way to make this apply to my small team?
Absolutely. And shout out to the small teams. making it happen. I before worked on a 2-person team, and we did everything from job postings to walking candidates in. We did all the marketing, everything. So shout out to the small but mighty teams. It's not that different. It really isn't. It may be on a smaller scale, and the resources might be a little bit different, but you think about what your process looks like and where you can make the changes. So don't look at it from, okay, this is what we're doing now, and think that you have to completely flip it over its head. You know, take a look at the process and objectively look at it and say, okay, here are maybe where, from our perspective, I would like to make some changes. So you have that list, and then you can tap into people internally, to leadership, other hiring managers, and say, okay, so these are maybe some of the concerns that we have, and maybe that's another list. And then connect with leadership, your candidates, and from there kind of plug and play. Some of it is trial and error. So some of that benchmarking that I mentioned, see what big companies are doing, seeing what smaller companies are doing, and then being strategic about working it into your plans so that you can grow your culture from there.
I almost feel like personally with something as small as like a few persons team, it might even be easier for you to gather the data and the details to just fine tune, pinpoint exactly what it is you need to fill. And you already work so closely with the minimal sized team, you already kind of have an idea and a better understanding sooner than later of like how you guys work together as a team. So it might almost be easier, in my opinion, to find, because when you work for a massive corporation, there's so many more long-term data and things to gather and collect to kind of come to a resolution you're looking for. So wonderful. Getting some thank yous back. I think that is officially now the end of questions. I haven't seen any more come in Q&A or chat. So for the most part, I definitely know that people have taken away some great information from you. I personally have too. Maybe I'll start tweaking some things and looking at some things, but I do definitely appreciate you taking the time out of your day today to do this for us. And just to remind everybody, this is recorded. So I'm going to have Tricia's presentation up on the Hotel Community Forum and Senior Community Forum. And I'll also be sharing that link with you, Tricia, once I get it all edited and uploaded.
Okay, perfect. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you all.
Thank you again. You have a wonderful weekend.
You too.